I'm 93 years old. I was married for 61 years. And the worst mistake I made in marriage was not anger, it was certainty.
I thought once you loved somebody deeply enough, you understood them. And once you understood them, the work was mostly done. That is a very comfortable lie. It is also a very lonely one.
Her name was Marian. She had dark hair when Leonard met her, sharp cheekbones, and a laugh that came out before she decided whether something was funny. She waitressed at a diner outside Dayton. Leonard was 29 then, working at a machine shop, coming home every night with metal dust in his calves and the smell of coolant on his hands. She moved fast, he moved steady. That felt, at the time, like a perfect arrangement. Leonard used to say Marian brought the weather into a room. When she was happy, the whole house felt larger. When she was hurt, even the hallway felt narrow. They got married in 1965 at St. Luke's, in July heat so thick the men kept dabbing their collars with handkerchiefs. The cake leaned a little to the left. Leonard's brother drank too much punch. Marian laughed through the whole reception like she had gotten away with something. For a long time, Leonard believed that was marriage. Find someone whose energy fills in your missing parts. Build a house, raise your children, pay the bills on time, stay faithful, grow old. Simple. That was his first mistake. Because marriage is simple only if both people agree to remain unfinished in the exact same way. Real life does not allow that. They had 2 boys, a brick ranch with weak plumbing, a station wagon that always pulled slightly right. Ordinary years, which Leonard would later understand were the holiest kind. Marian packed lunches, clipped coupons, sang to the radio while she scrubbed dishes. Leonard worked 6 days most weeks. There was never much money, but there was routine, and routine can disguise a lot of neglect. He believed peace in a marriage meant fewer questions. He believed that if a man had to keep asking who his wife was, something must already be wrong. So he stopped asking, "How are you, really? What are you afraid of? What do you miss? What do you want now that the boys are older?" Instead, he asked about roast beef. He asked where the flashlight was. He asked whether the insurance payment had gone through. That was his version of closeness. In 1987, when Marian was 50, she said she wanted to take evening classes at Sinclair. Leonard remembered the exact moment because he was standing at the sink peeling an orange with a pocket knife. She said it casually, almost like she was testing whether the room was safe. "I've been thinking about nursing." He laughed, not because it was funny, because he thought she was dreaming out loud, and he had long believed one of a husband's duties was to bring things back down to size. "Nursing," he said, "at 50? She did not raise her voice. That should have warned him. She just said, "Yes, at 50. He asked why. What he meant was why now. What he also meant was why become somebody he did not already recognize. She dried her hands slowly on a dish towel and said, because there is still more life left in me. A wiser man would have heard courage in that sentence. Leonard heard inconvenience. Who would make dinner 3 nights a week? Who would drive her home after late classes? What about tuition? What about the fact that their lives already had a shape, and he liked that shape? What he said was, "This family already has a good life." What she said was, "A good life is not the same as a finished one." She enrolled anyway, and Leonard punished her for it in all the clean, respectable ways a man can punish a woman without ever raising his hand. He got quiet. He got sarcastic. He called her classes her little program once, and the shame of that sentence stayed with him for years. She studied anatomy at the kitchen table under the yellow light, while he sat in the living room pretending to watch the Reds game. Some nights she came home excited and tried to tell him what she had learned. He answered with one-word sounds. Maybe. Uh-huh. That's good. He was not confused. He was threatened. Not by another man, not by betrayal, by change. Because the truth was this. Leonard had not married Marian as a whole person. He had married the version of Marian that fit Liv. And when she stargates becoming larger than that whose version, he courage like disloyalty. One night, she stood in the doorway between the kitchen and living room, still in her sneakers, books pressed against her chest, and said, "You keep talking to me like marriage to you means staying small." He said, "Things are leaving the life this house was built on." She shook her head. "No, Leonard. What's being left behind is the box built around me." That sentence sat in the house for years, because she was right. And right things are hard to live beside when pride still runs the room. She finished the program, passed her exams, started working part-time at a rehab center on the north side. People praised her. Their boys were proud of her. Neighbors called her inspiring. Leonard said the correct things in public. At home, he stayed cold. That is another thing ashamed men do. They mistake stiffness for dignity. He told himself he was not cruel. He never cheated, never left, never shouted, never broke furniture, never missed an anniversary unless it honestly slipped his mind. But a marriage can be starved without making a sound. Curiosity can be withheld. Tenderness can be withheld. The willingness to meet the person standing in front of you can be withheld. Because loyalty is still being given to the version from 20 years ago. And that is exactly what Leonard did. By the time Leonard was 68, he and Marian still lived in the same house, slept in the same bed, paid the same taxes, attended the same weddings and funerals. From the outside, they looked solid. Inside, they had become polite witnesses to each other. Then she got sick. Not catastrophic, but serious enough. It was her heart, an irregular rhythm, shortness of breath. A hospital stay that was supposed to be 2 nights and became 6. On the third night, a young nurse came in around 10 and said, "Mr. Hale, what usually calms her down when she's anxious?" Leonard opened his mouth, then closed it, because he did not know. He knew her coffee order from 1978. He knew she hated turnips. He knew the dress she wore to his cousin's wedding in 71 and the name of the dog she had when she was 8. But he did not know what calmed the woman she had become. The nurse waited. Finally, he said, "Years ago, hand rubbing used to help." Used to. That was the phrase that nearly killed him. Used to. He had spent years married to memory. That night, Marian was half awake, hospital bracelet loose on her wrist, grey hair spread against that thin white pillow, and she looked smaller than he had ever seen her. Leonard sat beside her and asked the first honest question he had asked in a very long time. What matters most right now? Not what mattered years ago, not what used to help. Now. She opened her eyes and looked at him in a way that made him feel both loved and accused. Then she said, very quietly, "Stop introducing the woman in this bed to her old life." There it was, the whole failure. He had not lost his wife to time. He had lost contact with her because he kept insisting on yesterday. When she came home, Leonard did something that felt embarrassingly small for a man his age. He started asking questions, real ones. What thoughts arrive at 3 in the morning? Does nursing still feel like freedom? Which part of life has felt most like your own? What did this house fail to notice while the boys were growing up? What kind of loneliness can exist beside another person? Some answers were gentle, some were not. She told him there had been years when she felt more managed than known. Years when she stopped bringing him her interior life because he kept handing it back in reduced form. She said he had loved her faithfully, but not curiously. That line changed him, because faithful had always sounded like a compliment, until he understood that it can also be a shield. A man can be faithful and still absent, reliable and still unreachable, present and still impossible to truly live beside. The last 11 years of their marriage were the best ones. Not because youth came back, not because romance returned in some movie version of itself, but because Leonard finally understood the job. The job was not to memorize the woman he married. The job was to keep meeting the woman she became. At 70, at 78, at 83, at the kitchen table, on the porch in October, in the car after church, in silence after hard news, in the middle of ordinary Tuesdays. That was marriage. Not possession, not certainty, not the arrogance of saying, already known. No. Marriage, if it is alive, requires reintroduction. Marian died at 90, The week after the funeral, their oldest boy asked, "Dad, what do you miss most?" The easy answers came first. Her cooking, her laugh, the way the house felt when she was in it. But the true answer was harder. What Leonard missed most was being surprised by her. And what hurt most was realizing how much of her had almost been missed.
So here is the truth from a 93-year-old man. The danger in marriage is not that a spouse will change. The danger is that change will arrive and one heart will punish the other for it, because growth interrupts comfort. Do not love a husband as a fixed idea. Do not love a wife as a preserved version. Do not keep calling devotion what is really familiarity. Ask again, listen again, meet again, because the person beside you is not a statue. And if love only works when nothing changes, that is not love. That is fear wearing a wedding ring. What kept this marriage alive in the end was not chemistry, not history, not duty. It was humility. The humility to admit that the woman in front of him was still unfolding, and the courage to stop loving her like she had already finished. That is what old age taught him, and it taught him just in time.